Chapter 841. His voice was bitter. I won't let you get pregnant again. Chi-Chi, you won't have any more children. We won't have any more children. I won't put you in danger again. Never again. Tang Yu, this person and this heart will always be yours. No matter how hard it is, I will let you live well and live happily. However, I will never be able to see you in someone else's arms. Perhaps I'm stingy because I've said that Tang Yu belongs to Pei Chi-Chi, and Pei Chi-Chi must also belong to Tang Yu. His heart was as cold as water, but he still picked up her clothes and held her hand. Put on your clothes. I'll put them on myself. Her voice was still cold. Tang Yu paused for a moment and let go of her. He looked at her deeply and walked out of the room. She walked out after getting dressed. Tang Yu was sitting by the bed, guarding Xiaoxin. He looked at her indifferently. If you want to go back, I'll ask old Zhao to send you. Pei Chi-Chi found a single-seater sofa and sat down. I'll wait for dawn before leaving. Although she did not explain, Tang Yu knew that she was worried about Xiaoxin. He did not say anything more and reached out to cover Xiaoxin with the quilt. The lights were dimmed. It was late at night, and it was quiet. Pei Chi-Chi was very awake at first, but she slowly relaxed and felt sleepy. Her eyelids closed gently. The sofa was not a bed, so she could not sleep well and kept moving around. The night was getting darker and darker. A pair of big hands carried her and gently placed her on the soft bed. Then, a chubby little thing nestled in her arms. Its little mouth habitually searched for a place, and its little paw rested on her shoulder. That feeling was very warm. Pei Chi-Chi did not wake up. She did not want to wake up. In her dream, a pair of black eyes kept looking at her. It was very, very gentle. The first ray of sunlight shone into the pink ward. Pei Chi-Chi felt that it was a little dazzling. She shivered uncomfortably and opened her eyes. There was no one around her. She lay quietly for a while and sat up. She looked down at her clothes. Wear it properly. She thought that Tang Yu and Xiaoxin had left and was about to get off the bed when she heard Xiaoxin's soft voice, Brother, have you found them? Pei Chi-Chi's heart skipped a beat. She put on her shoes and went to open the bathroom door. Tang Yu was wearing a mask, and so was Xiaoxin. The two of them were squatting in front of a small basin, which contained the steak and cake that Xiaoxin had eaten last night. It was just that it didn't smell as good as before. Laughs immorally, Tang Yu was wearing gloves and holding a small stick in his hand. He was trying hard to find something. Little Exine squatted at the side and watched. Pei Chi-Chi coughed. Take your time. Wait. Tang Yu's voice was soft as he picked up a diamond ring. He picked it up and looked at the indescribable small object. His voice was calm as he said, 30-carat American pink diamond, worth about 300 million. He tilted his head to look at her. Are you tempted? Pei Chi-Chi did not know what to say. She pursed her lips. Give it back to Jin Rong. Since Xiaoxin was fine, it was time for her to leave. At this moment, Xiaoxin looked at Tang Yu. Haha, this is Xiaoxin's poop. It's Xiaoxin's. Haha, I'll buy it for you next time. Tang Yu wanted to rub her hair, but stopped himself when he thought of his clothes. Chapter 842. Tang Yu really couldn't bear to see her dressed like this, especially in the same car. He couldn't wait to take a bath with Xiaoxin and wash herself clean. Pei Chi-Chi stood at the door for a while and guessed what he was thinking. She didn't bring her bag, so she could only take out 200 yuan notes to hail a taxi. Tang Yu didn't stop her. After she left, he immediately asked the nurse to clean the toilet bowl, and then he took Xiaoxin to take a bath. There was a big bathtub with a small bed inside. The plump little fellow was lying on the small bed, happily swaying back and forth, covered in foam. Tang Yu rinsed the ring and looked at it for a long time before putting it away. He stepped into the bathtub, stretched his body, and let out a long sigh of relief when he thought of Pei Chi-Chi. Hee. The little fellow crawled over and climbed on his shoulder. Her little hands grabbed his short black hair, and she was playing very happily. Tang Yu smiled, pulled the little fellow down, and placed her on his chest, letting her sit and play. He looked at Xiaoxin's delicate little face and pondered. Xiaoxin looked more like him, so Chi-Chi didn't suspect anything. However, if Shen Zhongshan started to take action, how long could Xiaoxin's identity be hidden from her? Hee. Xiaoxin giggled, and her little white teeth were especially cute. She was raised very well and chubby, but no one knew that she was born prematurely. In the beginning, she was as fragile as a kitten, and he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to raise her, and he was afraid that she would inherit that disease. Fortunately, Xiaoxin was getting healthier day by day. Tang Yu reached out to pinch Xiaoxin's little face, and his heart skipped a beat. Xin, call Daddy. Hee. Call Daddy. Hee. Xiaoxin was very determined. Tang Yu smiled and didn't insist anymore. After bathing together, he wrapped the little fellow in a small bath towel and carried her to the room. Someone had already prepared the little princess's dress and pretty little leather shoes. Tang Yu only had a bath towel around his waist, and he helped Xiaoxin put on her clothes before cleaning himself up. Then, he drove Xiaoxin to Lin Yun's place for breakfast. Xiaoxin ate on her brother's lap, which made Zhao Yin very eager. You're a boy. Lin Yun blushed and sighed in her heart. Tang Yu also felt bitter in his heart. She was clearly his daughter, but he couldn't acknowledge her and could only care for her like this. When he was about to leave for the company, Lin Yun followed him. Tang Yu, how is Chi? Tang Yu placed his finger on the car door, lowered his eyes and smiled. She's going back first. Lin Yun nodded and didn't say anything else. Tang Yu got in the car, and the black limousine quickly left the villa. Before going to Shangyuan, he went to the Lin Corporation's headquarters. As Tang Yu walked, Lin Jinrong's secretary followed him. Mr. Tang, the CEO, is in a conference. Tang Yu stopped in his tracks, his expression indifferent. Then you'd better call him now to stop. The secretary was stunned. Tang Yu had already opened the door to the CEO's office. Lin Jinrong was indeed in a conference, and his secretary wanted to say something, but stopped because he couldn't afford to offend any of them. Lin Jinrong quickly said a few words in French to end the conference, and then ordered indifferently, make 2 cups of coffee. Chapter 843. Lin Jinrong looked at Tang Yu and gestured for him to sit down. He then smiled. I heard from my aunt that Xiaoxin is fine. Yes. Tang Yu walked over and threw something in front of Lin Jinrong. This is for you. I found it in Xiaoxin. I thought you might need it. Lin Jinrong stared at the pink diamond. It should be filled with the smell of Xiaoxin. After a long time, he smiled softly. I can still afford a ring. The corner of Tang Yu's mouth twitched. He sat down on the sofa and held his forehead with his slender fingers. His voice was a little tired. Jinrong, you and her won't end well. Give up. What about you? Lin Jinrong sat with his fingers folded into the shape of a pyramid. Brother Tang Yu, what's the result between you and her? Or what plans do you have for her? Can you tell me? Tang Yu hooked his lips and said lightly, we got together last night. Lin Jinrong's expression changed. He looked straight at Tang Yu and then said word by word. I heard that Chi is Tang Zhong's child. Jinrong, I believe that with your intelligence, you can already guess whose child Xiaoxin is. Why are you constrained by Pei Chi's background? Tang Yu lowered his eyes. Even if she is my sister, I will not give up. If it wasn't an accident, even if she was his sister, he would still want their child. Jinrong, Chi is very important to me, but you are also very important to me, Tang Yu said lightly and then got up to leave. Lin Jinrong sat there. From his fingertips to the soles of his feet, he felt cold. He sat there in a daze and closed his eyes. Sure enough, it was just as he thought. However, he was the fool, and the fool was Chi. He thought he had another chance, while Chi thought that Tang Yu didn't love her that much. His secretary came in with coffee and was surprised to find that Tang Yu had left. Lin Jinrong's voice was very calm. Linda, cancel all the itineraries for today. How ridiculous. Yesterday, he had proposed to her in high spirits, but today, he had already guessed what he was thinking. Originally, he had a lot of achievements in his heart, and he felt that he didn't care. He even thought that he could compete with Tang Yu. But now, he still hesitated. Tang Yu went downstairs and sat in the car. After pondering for a while, he picked up his phone and opened QQ. He logged into Chu Shibei's alternate account and sent a message to Pei Xiaohua. Did you have a good night? It took 5 minutes for the other side to reply. First, he sent an emoji wiping sweat, followed by a string of words. You will never imagine what I went through last night. Tell me about it. I was almost proposed to by the boy I used to like. There was a picture of a girl's heart at the end. Tang Yu frowned and quickly replied, "Are you going to agree?" "No." Pei Xiaohua replied quickly. "Of course not." "Then, are you moved?" It took 5 minutes for the other side to reply. The content of the reply made Tang Yu's heart jump. If I hadn't been married, I would have said yes. Tang Yu frowned and threw the phone aside. But after a while, he picked it up again. He frowned and thought for a long time before sending it over again. "You were married?" "Yes." Pei Xiaohua sent an emoji. "My ex-husband was very handsome, but also a jerk. He ran away with another woman. Handsome, but also a jerk?" Tang Yu was speechless. Chapter 844. Pei Xiaohua replied quickly, "His body is actually quite good. His technique is also good." Tang Yu's face darkened. How could she chat so openly with a man who was almost a stranger? He thought of her shy body last night. How could she be so open with her mouth? She must have been influenced by old Can. He thought for a while and sent another message. "How good was it? Do you still miss it occasionally?" Only 3 words came from the other side. "Stupid child." Tang Yu chuckled. His chuckle had a profound meaning to it. Xiao Ran knocked on the door and motioned for her to come in. When Xiao Ran came in, she noticed that the corners of Tang Yu's mouth were slightly raised. He seemed to be in a good mood. "How's the preparation for Marvel's press conference going?" Tang Yu's tone was indifferent as he buried himself in the documents. Xiao Ran nodded. "It's almost ready. But which media does the CEO want to give the exclusive headline to?" Tang Yu pondered for a while. "Just do what you did in the past." Xiao Ran didn't say anything else. He thought to himself that it was mainly because Pei Chi was working as a magazine photographer. The CEO couldn't be too obvious if he wanted to give it to her. She reported a few more things before leaving. Tang Yu stared at her back and was in a daze for a while. On the other hand, Pei Chi hated the chief editor's request. "Chief editor, our magazine focuses on the needs of women. It's not appropriate to follow a man all the time, right?" Pei Chi was screaming in her heart. She was a photographer, not a paparazzi. This time, the editor-in-chief was not joking with her. He held a cigarette in one hand. The editor-in-chief usually smoked when he was talking about serious matters, and threw a few pieces of paper on the table. He took a deep puff and said, "Don't women need men? Look at this data." Pei Chi took it and looked at the data on it. She couldn't help but be stunned. The Weibo account opened under the name of Tang Yu's fan club has more than 30 million views, and the number of fans has reached more than 7 million. The chief editor narrowed his eyes and said, "Do you know how many fans the A-list celebrities have? Some of those tens of millions of fans are bullshit, bought with money." Pei Chi's body was a little stiff. But these successful people are different from the popular newbies. "Editor-in-chief, if you make a big fuss or aim to make a profit, you will be sued at any time." The chief editor calmed himself down and waved his hand. "The higher-ups are interested in doing a new magazine. It will be a sister to Jiaren's original magazine. It's mainly targeted at successful men. More importantly, rich and handsome men. Forget about those balding men in their 40s. No woman would spend money on them." Pei Chi looked at the bald chief editor and pursed her lips. The previous cover of Shengyuan Corporation's CEO was very successful. "Look, the enthusiasm of the female fans is very high. So, the new magazine will use the previous issue's character. I heard that Marvel's new product launch is going to be held soon. Little Pei, you can't be disappointed. You have to get this exclusive." The chief editor was astute. "It's okay to take a few photos. The main thing is the interview. Now, the readers have a big appetite. If we can give them a copy of the special VCD recording, it will definitely sell out." Pei Chi couldn't help but say, "Chief editor, what's the difference between this and consuming men?" The chief editor's eyes widened. "We don't need you to sell it, nor do we need me to sell it. Fine." Chapter 845. The managing editor immediately changed his expression and smiled. "Xiao Pei, I can see that you're an all-rounder. How about this? I'll assign 3 or 4 people to you. You're familiar with Amy and the rest. Don't feel pressured. We'll have a double issue with Jiaran." As he spoke, he stood up and walked to her side. He patted her on the shoulder and said earnestly, "Betting a new magazine on a newcomer. This shows that the higher-ups value you. Little pay, work hard. Who knows, maybe this office will be yours when I return to H City in the future." Pei Chi was speechless and resisted weakly. "Managing editor, I don't have any lofty ideals. I just want to eat and drink with my mentor." "Silly girl, don't talk nonsense." The managing editor turned into a kind elder and patted her again. "Work hard. I have high hopes for you." Pei Chi looked at him with resentment in her eyes. She felt very uncomfortable when she came out of the office. Oldkin looked at her as if he was about to explode. "What's wrong?" Oldkin leaned against the wall and looked at his beloved little disciple. Pei Chi leaned against the wall opposite him and imitated Oldkin by stretching her legs against the opposite wall. Oldkin could be tall, but her legs were only half the size of his, so naturally, she couldn't. She pursed her lips and said, "The managing editor said that the higher-ups are going to start a new magazine, mainly aimed at female consumers, with elite men in various industries as models." Oldkin smiled, revealing his white teeth. "That's pretty good. Actually, Jaren has been going downhill all these years. If we don't reform it, it'll really have nothing to eat. In the past, the sponsors were all big names. Look at now, even Tom, Dick, and Harry can be on it." Pei Chi looked up. "Oldkin, I'm serious. I don't want to get it wrong. Are you afraid that your ability is limited?" Oldkin smiled. "No." Her voice was a little weak. "It's not like that." Pei Chi looked up at the small window above her and said softly, "I just feel that life in City H is more suitable for me. Perhaps returning to City B was a mistake. She shouldn't have come back." Lauken stared at her for a long time and said in a hoarse voice, "Are you backing down again?" She pressed the cigarette butt. "Isn't it just a matter of sleeping with a man or not? Sleep with him again. If you think that's it, then you should let him go. If you still want to sleep with him and don't want him to sleep with someone else, then you can't let him go." Pei Chi glared at him. Old Tease said, "His words are crude, but his logic is not. But what if he's a blood brother?" Pei Chi looked at Lao Can and asked faintly. Oldkin was stumped by the question. When he came back to his senses, Pei Chi was already far away. Pei Chi returned to her desk and stared blankly at the pile of things. She simply wanted to pack them up and leave immediately, but she couldn't bear to part with Amy, Lao Can, and even the cunning chief editor. Sighing, he accepted his fate. The little man on the computer popped up again. It was Chu Shibei. "Why haven't you spoken for a long time?" Pei Chi typed a string of words slowly. "Xiao Bei, the chief editor wants me to sell myself to Min. If I lose my job, can you take care of me?" The other side replied with an emoticon and said, "Sure." Then, he added a few more words. "I'll definitely take care of you until you're fair and fat." Chapter 846. Although she had only known Chu Shibei on the internet for a few days, she could feel that he was a sweet boy and she could bully him as much as she wanted. The screen went blank for a while before a line of words appeared. "Yes. Why don't we inspect the goods first?" Pei Chi looked at it and laughed for a long time. "Little brat." On the other side, Tang Yu smiled. His fingers gently stroked the screen, as if he was touching her little face. "Chi, if I can give you a little happiness, I'm willing to do everything I can." He pressed the intercom and called Xiao Ran. "Arrange for the exclusive launch to be cancelled." Xiao Ran was surprised. If the exclusive launch was cancelled, then it must have been decided internally. But it was not convenient for him to ask, so he just wrote it down and left. The launch of the number 7 robot was unprecedentedly grand because there was a rumor from Marvel that there would be a mysterious guest that day. The reporters arrived at the venue early and occupied the best position to take the exterior shots. They could only enter the hotel lobby when the time was up. Pei Chi and Lao Can came together. The venue was at the hotel in the science park of B City. The autumn sun was a little hot, and Pei Chi and Lao Can's faces were covered in oil. Lao Can looked down at Pei Chi's little face. "Why do you want to learn photography? It's so nice for a girl to enjoy the air conditioning in the office." Pei Chi smiled and wiped her sweat with a tissue. I thought I only needed to go to a place with good scenery to take a few beautiful photos. I didn't expect to be a paparazzi. Laukin patted her comfortingly. After a while, I will apply to the chief editor to go back to H City. I will bring you along. His tone made Pei Chi feel like she was his little luggage. Although it was plain, it was already very rare for Pei Chi. Her eyes were a little hot, but she said nothing and continued to look at the entrance. At about 9:30, a few black limousines lined up in front of the hotel entrance. They were all Rolls-Royce Phantoms, and the Golden Goddess stood proudly in the sun. The driver got out of the car and walked to the door of the second car. The door opened and a noble figure got out. Tang Yu calmly buttoned up the first button on his suit. He was already used to being besieged by so many reporters, so he remained calm. Mr. Tang, the new product is so secretive. There's still half an hour before the press conference. Can you reveal it in advance? Mr. Tang, I heard that you personally participated in the creative design this time. Does it have a special meaning for you? Under the flashing lights, Tang Yu was escorted forward by the security guards. He did not answer any of the reporters' questions. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. In front of them was Pei Chi. She was holding a heavy camera up to him, wearing a black t-shirt. A t-shirt and jeans, really not too eye-catching. However, even if his Chi was wearing a gunny sack, he would still recognize her and think that she looked good. Tang Yu did not move. Pei Chi's hand that was holding the camera also froze. In the lens, he was looking straight at her. She put down the camera and stood there, looking at him in a daze. Tang Yu walked straight to her and stood in front of her. She only took a step back. He stood in front of her and said in a low voice, "Are you Miss Pei from Beauty Magazine?" What did he mean? Chapter 847. Just now, my secretary has confirmed with your magazine that the exclusive interview for the new product will be held in your new issue. His voice was elegant and charming, and he was talking to an unknown reporter like this, so it was naturally attention-grabbing. Pei Chi's lips suddenly felt a little dry. Exclusive interview rights. Shouldn't she have begged him many times? Why did he give it to her so readily this time? Pei Chi, because I miss you. Tang Yu's gaze was deep, and he quickly straightened his body. At this moment, Pei Chi realized how close he had been to her just now, almost whispering into her ear. Something was breaking out of her cocoon, but she couldn't grasp it. He was too strong and calm, while she was just like a lab rat under his claws. He watched her struggle hopelessly, coldly watching her coldly. Oldkin patted her and grinned. What's wrong? Pei Chi lowered her eyes. Nothing. Let's get ready to go in. Just as they were about to go in, Old Can's eyes widened, not for anything else, but because he saw Pei Huan. Pei Huan had actually come. She was wearing a white palace ring dress, and her long hair was curled up to her waist. She looked rather pure and innocent. Old Can's eyebrows twitched. After all, he had slept with someone before, so he didn't feel confident. Pei Huan walked over and glanced at Old Can, as though she had forgotten what had happened that night, and said to Pei Chi, "I'll wait for you in the car later." Pei Chi guessed what she was talking about. She lowered her head and fiddled with the camera, nodding. Pei Huan looked at her ambiguous expression and was a little angry. She felt that she was always sticking her warm face to her cold, but it also felt uncomfortable if she didn't stick close to her. Pei Huan and her manager, Xiao Mei, went in first. From the looks of it, it was very likely that Pei Huan would be the spokesperson for Marvel this time. Pei Chi was a little surprised. Because Pei Huan had been involved in a scandal during the previous endorsement, Tang Yu didn't seem like a decision-maker who would use a tainted celebrity. She and Laukin walked in, and the staff quickly arranged them in an orderly manner. Their seats were near the front, right in the middle of the second row. After Oldkin sat down, he whispered, "Pei Chi, do you think we're taking advantage of you?" Pei Chi glanced at him and smiled. "I think you're taking advantage of Pei Huan." Oldkin touched his nose and said nothing. The staff on the stage were busy, and after 10 minutes, the scene calmed down. Marvel's public relations staff presided over the press conference. After a brief speech, they stepped back and said, "We welcome Mr. Tang Yu, the CEO of Marvel, to open this press conference for us." Tang Yu ascended the stage from the side. He was still calm and elegant. He took the microphone and smiled. Everyone knows that the last time Marvel made a big move was almost 2 years ago. Originally, this press conference was supposed to be held a week ago, but something important happened that day. As Tang Yu said this, there was a commotion from the audience. They must know what the important thing was. There was a little more gentleness in his eyes. It's the birthday of a very important person. The audience fell silent. Mr. Shun's birthday wasn't this month. If Mr. Tang said this publicly, it would be very disrespectful to Mr. Shun. So the rumors about Mr. Shun forcing a marriage were true? Thinking about it, if a man loved you, he wouldn't wait until he was almost 30 to marry you. Chapter 848. Tang Yu smiled. The main product this time is actually a high-end chip. In terms of sales, it's not targeted at the general public. However, in order to highlight the power of this chip, Marvel custom-made the number 7 robot. Let me emphasize again, this is not the main product this time. The number 7 robot is a limited edition version. In total, there won't be more than 10,000 units. There was complete silence. The stage suddenly darkened. There was an uproar below. Following that, specks of starlight appeared above the stage, like little stars in the night sky. Cicadas and frogs chirped all around, as though they had walked into a midsummer night. Their hearts and minds calmed down in an instant. Pei Chi was in the darkness. Listening to those sounds, she seemed to hear the sound of flowing water. The lights slowly lit up, giving off a warm yellow glow. Tang Yu sat on a beige sofa, flipping through a magazine. Beside him sat a small, ugly, and adorable thing. Was that the number 7 robot? That little thing was very realistic and soft, although it wasn't pretty. In particular, its expression was very vivid. At first, it sat obediently, but after a while, it seemed to be impatient. Then, it swept to Tang Yu's side, laying its face on his lap and looking up. Big brother. Tang Yu was still holding the magazine. A slender hand stroked the ugly but adorable thing. Little 7, don't mess around. Little 7? Pei Chi-Chi's body trembled. The little thing on the stage pouted. Its eyes seemed to be brimming with tears, as though it had been wronged. Then, it actually ignored Tang Yu. It crawled to the side and lay down. Moreover, it was the kind where its butt was facing the sky. Tang Yu put down the magazine in his hand and glanced at her. He sat down and pressed the ugly but adorable thing on his lap. He patted it lightly. Are you angry? No. Little 7 lay down, its voice muffled. After that? No, there was no after. Tang Yu didn't plan on revealing too much of his private life to others. The light dimmed once more and 7 disappeared. Tang Yu held a small chip in his hand. His gaze swept around and finally landed on Pei Chi-Chi's shocked face. He smiled slightly. This chip has a memory function. It's so powerful that you can't even imagine it. It can even copy the person you once loved. His black eyes were fixated on her little face, and Pei Chi-Chi actually couldn't move an inch. Tang Yu's lips curled into a faint smile. As for robot number 7, it needs to be customized and undergo a strict background check. At this point, the reporters became excited. What they were most concerned about was, Mr. Tang, the price of robot number 7 must be too high, right? In my opinion, it is priceless. Tang Yu was ambiguous and did not want to reveal too much. As for the rest, I will accept an exclusive interview with Jiaren. Everyone will know then. There was another uproar at the scene. Pei Huan sat backstage and rolled her eyes. If the public knew that this press conference was just to let Pei Chi-Chi see that little 7 and that there wouldn't be any robot for sale, how would they feel? Anyone who ordered robot number 7 would be rejected. What a good hand. Pei Huan bit her fingernails and thought lazily. Chapter 849. The press conference ended in an hour. After people left one after another, Pei Chi-Chi was still sitting there. It took her a long time to recover. Tang Yu was no longer there. Xiao Ran came over and said, Miss Pei, our president invites you to the reception room upstairs. Pei Chi looked at Old Kansas. Xiao Ran was obviously in a difficult position. Forget it. I'll go by myself. Wait for me here. Old Kansas. Pei Chi put down her camera back. Old Kan took it and said, You used to call me master. Since that night, your image in my heart has disappeared. Pei Chi gave Old Kan a look. Old Kan understood, but he was a little annoyed. Pei Chi followed Xiao Ran into a reception room on the second floor. Tang Yu stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. When he heard the door open, he said lightly, Xiao Ran, you go out first. However, Pei Chi stopped Xiao Ran. Wait a minute. Her voice was a little anxious. I'll leave in a moment. Tang Yu turned around, and his eyes quietly fell on Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran could only apologize to Pei Chi. He quickly left and closed the door. The sound of the door closing was very soft, but it seemed to knock on Pei Chi's heart. Tang Yu moved his eyes to her little face and said indifferently, Sit. Pei Chi looked at him for a while before sitting down. Her body was a little stiff. Tang Yu walked over slowly and took off his coat and threw it on the back of the sofa. He leaned against the back of the sofa and closed his eyes slightly. Pei Chi waited for a long time, but he didn't say anything. She pursed her lips and said, Mr. Tang? Chi, must we be so distant? He still closed his eyes and covered them with a slender and well-defined hand. His voice was low and pleasant. I think you should have guessed why robot number 7 exists. That little 7 was her copy. Pei Chi's whole body stiffened. Tang Yu moved his hand away and stared at her with a piercing gaze. There were only the two of them in the private space. This situation was very similar to when they broke into his suite. Pei Chi closed her eyes and said in a weak voice, Tang Yu, I believe you when you say that we are related by blood, but I don't believe a brother would do such things to his sister. His little 7 was a robot, but in her eyes, it was no different from a Q doll. If he behaved like this today, how many people would go to YYY to see if he had laid his hands on the doll? Everything pointed to the fact that the truth was not what he had told her. If she continued to believe it, she would be an idiot. If she was his younger sister, he wouldn't be able to accept it. Based on Tang Xi's personality, he would either abandon her or lock her up by his side, unlike what he was doing now. This was what she had always suspected but was unwilling to believe. Because if he was not her brother, then what about their child? What was that? Pei Chi looked at Tang Yu. Tang Yu, do you know that I can't afford your love, and I can't afford to play your games? Don't play this game of, you guess and I hide with you. I will really disappear. She spoke sternly, not leaving any leeway for him. Tang Yu had to admit that the Pei Chi in front of him was no longer the little girl from before. She was not just a stubborn little girl. She was even willing to deal with him for the sake of her livelihood and Lao Kansas. She would also eat with Jinro. The boundaries of her survival were no longer as clear as before, but had become blurred. It was not time, but the harm that was slowly wearing her down. It was because he did not protect her well that she became so detached from society and lived so cautiously as if she was treading on thin ice. Tang Yu's voice was a little hoarse. Chi, you guessed it. Chapter 850. She looked at him coldly. Mr. Tang, why are you admitting this now? Is it because the robot named Little 7 can't satisfy you? So you're telling me that we're not siblings, so we can have sex, right? His eyes narrowed. Pei Chi, is that what you think? Yes. She stood up. I don't care what deal you have with Shunlian. Tang Yu, since you've chosen her, you'll choose her till the end. She then got up and walked to the door, forgetting the purpose of her visit. However, before the door could open, her arms were caught. Then, her two slender arms were raised high and held in place. She was pinned down by him, unable to move. Once she moved, she would be held even tighter. Pei Chi looked up and said coldly, Mr. Tang, are you excited again? I'm not interested in you at all. Let go of me. He narrowed his eyes and leaned forward. His handsome face revealed a touch of desolation. Pei Chi, do you hate me? Yes. She answered resolutely. His pupils were darker and his body was stiff, but he didn't let go of her. Pei Chi looked at him. her eyes as calm as a pool of stagnant water. Tangyu, is this interesting? She smiled and looked into his eyes. Can you break off the engagement with Shinlian now? He couldn't do it. Their bodies were still touching, and the desire that he had just raised his head was suppressed. His body loosened. Pei Chi thought that he had let her go. She was about to stand up, but her lips were kissed by him the next second. He kissed her mouth passionately, inside and out, wrapping himself around her body with his hot tongue. She moved a little, and in exchange, he took her even more violently. One of his long legs was stuck between her, and he only needed to lift it slightly to make her feel awkward. He called her name, called her baby, and said that he missed her very much. That kiss went from her lips to her eyebrows, then to the back of her ears and her neck. She was forced to tilt her head back and accept his slightly rough kisses. At this moment, Tangyu seemed to have lost his mind. He pressed against her and coaxed, "Chi, wait for me, okay?" She tried her best to widen her eyes to look at the ceiling. When she heard his words, Pei Chi chuckled lightly. She lowered her face and looked at his slightly intoxicated face. "What about our child? Tangyu, why did you tell us that you were brother and sister? If it wasn't for that, the child wouldn't have no." She closed her eyes and a stream of tears flowed from the corner of her eyes. She opened her slightly reddened eyes. "Can you return the child to me?" There was a hint of accusation in her eyes. Just as he thought, she hated him even more. Tangyu closed his eyes. He couldn't, at least not now. Pei Chi's body leaned back, and she looked at him helplessly. After looking at him, she chuckled. "Tangyu, if you can't, then don't pester me anymore." He didn't let go of her, nor did he take another step forward. He only looked at her. That day, just like now, she cried. When I opened my eyes, I saw a bright light. She looked up, and her voice was very soft and calm, but I knew that the child was gone. I didn't even get to see him. She was very calm, as though she was talking about someone else's matter. But with every sentence she said, the wound in her heart would tear open. Chapter 851. Tangyu looked at her, seeing that she was willing to talk to him for the first time. At this moment, he wished he could make it clear to her and tell her that Xiaoxin was his child. But it was not the time yet. The fate of Sheng Yuan and Madame Lin, as well as her illness, were not 100% certain. He did not dare to take the risk. Another concern was Xion's safety. It would be safer for Lin Yun and Zhao Yi's child to be by her side. This was a father's concern. Because of Chi, he allowed Xiaoxin to come into this world earlier. Looking at the lively and adorable Xiaoxin now, no one would know how much she had suffered when she was born. At that time, Xiaoxin's mother had undergone a bone marrow operation, and he did not accompany her. He owed Pei Chi and Xiaoxin a lot. No amount of love could make up for the child's innate lack of love. Tangyu hugged her gently. He did not do anything else to her. He just hugged her. It was a very warm hug. It was a comforting and apologetic hug, and he kept saying sorry in her ear. Her tears fell like rain. She could not control herself. She cried miserably in the arms of the man she loved and hated. Her little hands pounded on his back, unable to utter a single word. She cried and fell into his arms, calling his name and saying that she hated him. The sunlight shone in from the window and enveloped them, giving them a trace of warmth. Tangyu kept patting her, letting her beat and bite him, letting her vent. He said sorry and that he could not let go. He told her, Chi, wait for me. In a blur, she seemed to have fallen asleep, lying in the crook of his arm, exhausted. It was as if she had just found out that she did not have a child that day. She did not know how long it had been before she woke up. She was lying on his lap. A big palm was placed on her back, patting her gently. She got up and knelt beside him, tears still hanging on her eyelashes. Her expression at this moment was very much like Xiao Qi, asking for a hug. In fact, wasn't Xiao Qi also a substitute for Chi? And he exposed Xiao Qi in front of the outside world just to express his feelings to her. I ask you again, why did you tell such a lie? She asked him quietly. Tang Yu's gaze quietly fell on her little face. He faintly smiled and reached out to stroke her black hair. There was a huge difference between touching little Seven and touching Pei Chi-Chi. Pei Chi-Chi pursed her lips and looked at him with trembling eyes. His voice was low and hoarse. Is this answer very important to you? Yes. Her voice trembled slightly. Tang Yu's fingers were still gently stroking her long hair, but she didn't push his hand away. Finally, he said, Chi-Chi, you care about this answer because you haven't given up on me? She wanted to say no, but just as her lips moved, his finger pressed against her lips, stopping her. You need to find the truth yourself. He smiled, and the pain seemed to be far away from them. Chi-Chi, I'm here. He said in the end. Pei Chi-Chi's lips were still trembling. In the end, she ran away. She was afraid, very afraid. There seemed to be countless secrets hidden in Tang Yu's eyes. He said, Chi-Chi, I'm here. You need to find the truth yourself. Chapter 852. While Pei Chi-Chi was in a daze, Pei Huan's voice rang in her ears. Pei Chi-Chi, how can you walk? There are stairs in front of you. Do you want to fall to your death? She was grabbed by her arm. Pei Chi-Chi turned around and saw Pei Huan's twisted face, as if she hadn't made a sound for 3 days. Pei Huan let go of her and continued, Look at you. You look like you were raped by a man. She stared at Pei Chi-Chi's slightly swollen lips and her dazed gaze, especially the hickey on her neck. The more she looked, the more it looked like it. Did you get raped by Tang Yu? Pei Huan asked suspiciously. Pei Chi-Chi came back to her senses and touched her neck. She said calmly, I was bitten by a dog. Tang Yu was standing behind them for some reason. When he heard that, his face darkened. Behind him was Xiao Ran, who lowered his head and tried to hold back his laughter. The CEO was probably very angry. Pei Huan was especially happy. She watched as Tang Yu left with a dark expression. After they left, she looked at Pei Chi-Chi again and coughed softly. This Saturday, I've arranged for a religious ceremony at the house in Qingshui Road. You should come as well. Consider it a show of filial piety. Pei Chi-Chi's feelings were complicated. She wasn't Tang Ziyuan's child, but her intuition told her that she wasn't Pei Mingyi's child either. Tang Yu definitely knew, but he told her to find the truth herself, so he wouldn't say it. She pursed her lips and looked at Pei Huan. If I tell you that I'm my father's child, will you hate me again? Will you be irreconcilable with me? Pei Huan was stunned, and her face stiffened. After a while, she said, Pei Chi-Chi, I don't have the strength to hate anymore, just like how I don't have the strength to love anymore. She looked up with a heart-wrenching look in her eyes. Look at me. I have everything. I get hundreds of millions in dividends every year. I didn't become a celebrity for the money, but for the fun. I don't have to sleep with anyone, but I always feel a little cold when I sleep at night. As she spoke, she started to laugh. As she laughed, tears welled up in her eyes. Pei Chi-Chi, am I a slut in your eyes? How could I bother you? You used to be the person I hated the most. Without waiting for Pei Chi-Chi to speak, she continued, I know Lin Jianrong wants to be with you. That day in the restaurant, you and him were photographed. Later, it was President Qin who suppressed the news. Do you know why? Because President Qin likes you too. Pei Chi-Chi, I used to hate you. I hated that you were liked by so many people. But now, it doesn't matter. Being liked by others is also a burden. Look at you. How much happier are you than me? Pei Chi-Chi did not move. Pei Huan looked up and stopped her tears. Let's not talk about it anymore. You won't understand even if I talk about it. She stomped her feet. Pei Chi-Chi, I take back what I said earlier. You're still as annoying as before. She flung her head and left. Pei Chi-Chi's faint voice sounded from behind. Pei Huan. Pei Huan paused and turned around. Pei Chi-Chi was still looking at her calmly without any expression on her face. After a long time, she said softly, but I think you've gotten a lot cuter. Pei Huan's lips trembled as her facial muscles twitched unnaturally. She nearly shook off the hyaluronic acid she had injected last month. Really? Annoying. Pei Huan turned around and left. However, she felt a sweet feeling in her heart as she tossed her hair. She arrived at the lobby on the first floor and saw Lao Can waiting for Pei Chi. Chapter 853. Oldkin didn't fight back. He looked at that little waist twisting and turning. He remembered how soft her waist was that night. That night, she was actually quite young. Pei Huan had had many men, but the night Oldkin wanted her, she couldn't use those skills at all. Oldkin was a rough man, a straightforward one. He was strong enough to make her tremble, and he didn't need any skills to break her down. That night was the only time Pei Huan felt pain and happiness in the past 2 years, and the last time was given to her by Lin Jinrong. The difference was that she liked Lin Jinrong, while Oldkin was a complete wild man. Especially a wild man who had just pulled up his pants from another woman. She didn't want him at all. Oldkin watched Pei Huan leave, a little envious, but he didn't stop her. Pei Huan walked to the door, and her manager, Xiao Mei, immediately opened an umbrella for her. There were also 2 men in black who looked like bodyguards following her. Oldkin looked at them and quietly took out a cigarette from his pocket. He had only taken 2 puffs when a small hand snatched it away, put it out, and threw it into the trash can. "You're smoking again. Haven't you been traumatized by the shadow in your lungs the last time?" He turned around and saw that it was Pei Chi. Oldkin smiled. "Isn't it because I'm bored? I thought you wouldn't be bored when you saw Pei Huan." Pei Chi was a little sarcastic. She really had a problem with Oldkin on that matter. Even if Pei Huan didn't care, she still cared a little. Oldkin listened and hugged his little disciple affectionately. "Chi, I know you're jealous, right?" "I'm not." Pei Chi struggled, but couldn't break free from Oldkin's big fan-like hands. Oldkin smiled as he carried her away. This way, she would behave herself and would not cause him any trouble. And this intimate scene was seen by Tang Yu, who was sitting in the limousine. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Drive." Xiao Ren saw it too and sighed in his heart. "I wonder how traumatized the president is." When he arrived at Shengyuan building, Tang Yu took the elevator alone. He stood there indifferently and looked at himself in the mirror. His face was still the same, handsome and cold. Only when he saw Pei Chi would the fire in his heart ignite. And because of Little Seven's appearance at Marvel's press conference, the outside world had a better understanding of Tang Yu. What a mysterious pervert. Tang Yu raised Little Seven. Wasn't this a hobby that only otakus would have? Moreover, the way they interacted with each other was like a couple, which was a direct slap to Shan Lian's face. The newspapers reported about Little Seven and Tang Yu, but they were just speculations. After all, that was all they saw. However, Shan Lian could not hold it in any longer. The call came the next day. Tang Yu was in a meeting. When he saw that it was Shan Lian, he turned off his phone and said to his subordinates, "Continue the meeting." Xiao Ran saw Shan Lian's name and did not say anything. He thought that the arrogant President Shan would come looking for him later. Sure enough, before the meeting was over, the second secretary came over quietly and said to Xiao Ran in a low voice, "Sister Xiao, President Shan is here. He looks angry." "Got it. Go and tell President Shan that he still has half an hour," Xiao Ran said calmly at the door. Chapter 854. Naturally, Xiao Ran did not care about Shan Lian. He just had to put up a front. Firstly, she felt that if Shan Lian could not wait for half an hour, she would not be able to achieve anything. Secondly, the CEO's attitude was there, so she did not need to bother to wait on him. The second secretary understood and nodded her head before leaving. In fact, everyone could see clearly that Shan Lian was only a nominal fiancé in the past year. Xiao Ran returned to his seat and whispered a few words to Tang Yu. Looking at Tang Yu's calm expression, he must have already guessed it. The meeting ended half an hour later. Xiao Ran followed behind Tang Yu with the documents in his hands. When they arrived at Tang Yu's office, Shan Lian had already come out from the guest room to wait. She was obviously very anxious. Tang Yu paused at the door. "Secretary Xiao, make a cup of coffee for CEO Shan." Xiao Ran nodded. Xin Lian's voice was a little sharp. Tang Yu, I've stopped drinking coffee a long time ago. She lifted her leg and said coldly, I'm not allowed to drink here. After saying that, she smiled strangely. Her smile made Xiao Ran's hair stand on end. However, Tang Yu still looked calm. Xin Lian hated his expression, but there was nothing she could do. After Xiao Ran left, she said coldly, Aren't you going to invite me in? Tang Yu smiled impeccably. Xin Lian felt extremely sad. This was the man she loved deeply, but he no longer had any feelings for her. Or perhaps, he did not even have feelings for her. After the door closed, Tang Yu walked to the back of the desk and sat down. He looked at her indifferently. What's the matter? He was as indifferent as before. He still did not care about how she was doing or whether her leg was hurting. That's right. He wouldn't care, because her legs were his masterpiece. Why would he care? Why did that kind of news appear? Xin Lian's voice was agitated. A newspaper appeared in her hand, and she threw it in front of Tang Yu. He only glanced at it briefly before picking it up with a frown. The headline was about the grand launch of Robot Number 7. Xin Lian's voice was stifled. Tang Yu, the outside world speculation about you is that you are a man with a special interest in X, and this speculation has even surpassed the release of Marvel's new products. Is this what you want? Was he really a pervert? Or could it be that you couldn't forget her, so you made her into a robot so that she could accompany you every day? This fact deeply impacted her. She, a living woman, was actually inferior to a robot. So what? How others think is their business. Tang Yu smiled faintly. Just because of this? He was calm and collected. He was not impatient, but he was not overly concerned either. This was his attitude towards her for the past year. If she was an ordinary woman, her heart would have died. However, Xin Lian was determined to do so. If she was not happy, Tang Yu and Pei Qi could not be happy either. She could only hold on to her trump card and force him to submit. Okay, even so, how do you explain the exclusivity? Why did you give it to Pei Qi? Xin Lian's voice was a little agitated. You clearly know that Jin Taiha's man and Jiao Run are sworn enemies. Tang Yu looked at her quietly. Xin Lian, I am not a person who can't distinguish between public and private interests. I just want to see the results. I am very optimistic about Jiao Ren's bi-monthly publication. He did not need to explain anything else to her. Chapter 855. Then what's your bottom line? Tang Yu was still unmoved. Xin Lian's voice suddenly became sharp. Tang Yu, you're stepping on my bottom line now. What do you want? You want to be with her again, right? Think about Shang Yuan's future and her safety. As soon as she finished speaking, her eyes narrowed and she felt a little regretful. When he looked at Tang Yu, his gaze was filled with caution as he took a step back. Tang Yu slowly stood up and walked in front of Xin Lian in 2 steps. He stretched out his long arm and pinched her sharp chin with his fingers. He did not have any protective feelings for the fairer sex. Instead, he used all of his strength and almost crushed Xin Lian's bones. Xin Lian was in pain. She closed her eyes and said in a weak voice, "Let go of me." Tang Yu's face was as pale as snow. Xin Lian, listen up. My bottom line is Pei Qi. He said word by word, if you dare to touch her, I'll make you suffer 100 times worse. She was in pain from his grip, but she could not say a word. She could only stare at him with her eyes wide open. There was fear, sadness, and disbelief in her eyes. At this moment, the door opened. Xiao Ran was holding a cup of coffee in his hand and looked at the 2 people inside in shock. Tang Yu suddenly let go of Xin Lian. She stumbled 2 steps back and covered her chin with her hand. She was still in shock. Just now, she really thought that Tang Yu was going to kill her. Xiao Ran put the coffee on the table professionally. Mr. Shun, please have a drink. After that, he nodded and left, closing the door. Tang Yu, did you see that? Because of your attitude, even your secretary looks down on me and brushes me off. Xin Lian sneered. In the hearts of everyone in Shangyuan, only Pei Qi deserves to be the CEO's wife, right? She looked at him coldly. As long as I, Shunlian, am around. I want to see how she can come back. Tang Yu, even if she's with you, she won't be the wife of Shang Yuan CEO. I swear. Chi-Chi won't care. Tang Yu's voice was indifferent. Xin Lian raised her head. What about you? Don't you care? You're such a proud and arrogant man. How could you not be attached to power? Think about the Tang and Lin families behind you. Will they allow you to be so willful? Shunlian smiled pitifully. She could only threaten him with this. However, a woman could only use this to threaten a man. It was very sad. She felt sorry for herself, but she did not want to admit defeat. Tang Yu took a step back. He looked at her strange smile and felt his heart ache. In the past, Shunlian was also a girl as beautiful as a lotus. Shunlian, let go now. Letting go of me and her is letting go of yourself. Isn't that good? He said quietly. She's your sister. I don't have a sister like that. Shunlian's voice was agitated. I only know that I'm the only daughter of the Shin family. Jin Taiha's only heir. She looked at Tang Yu. You must think that I'm crazy, right? There was a hint of madness on her face. Do you think that I don't know what you're thinking? You'll drive me crazy and send me to the mental asylum. Then take back the shares in my hands. Dream on, Tang Yu. I've already asked my lawyer to sign a document. If anything happens to me, the things in my hands will take revenge on you in ways that you can't imagine. Xin Lian smiled as she stepped back. Tang Yu, you can't do anything to me. Even if I die, I'll still be your fiancé. Chapter 856. Xin Lian went downstairs and got into the car. Actually, she could not drive with her legs. Dr. Zhang had warned her many times, but she did not care. She had already died once, so she was not afraid of dying again. The car drove very fast, and the wind hit her face. It was painful, just like how Tang Yu's cold words hit her face. Xin Lian chuckled softly. Her chuckle gave her goosebumps. The red sports car drove to Shangyuan Hospital. Xin Zhongshan's condition had worsened recently, so he was admitted to the hospital again. Xin Lian got out of the car. When she stepped on the ground, she felt a little pain. She tried her best to walk steadily so that others would not notice the problem with her legs. She did not want others to know that she was a cripple, and this was given to her by Tang Yu. How could she not drag him to hell with her? She went straight to Shun Zhongshan's ward. There was no one else in the ward. Shin Zhongshan was sitting on the sofa, watching TV and eating a box of snacks. He spent most of his time eating without restraint. Shin Zhongshan was more than 20 kilograms heavier than before. He was no longer as elegant as he used to be. Instead, he had turned into a slightly slow-witted old man. Shin Lian walked over slowly and squatted in front of Shan Zhongshan. Shin Zhongshan was watching Happy Goat and Grey Taro with great interest. He was eating the snacks as he watched them. His eyes were as pure as a child's. Dad. Shin Lian squatted in front of him and took the snacks from his hand. She fed him carefully. She fed him with small bites and was especially careful. Is it delicious? Shin Zhongshan could not speak. He repeated the two words, delicious, delicious. Shun Lian's voice was still gentle. Eat more if it's delicious. She fed him faster and faster. Shin Zhongshan was slowly losing his strength. His mouth could not stop moving. He wanted to say something, but he could not. Shan Lian continued to stuff snacks into his mouth. The gentle smile on her face was getting more and more scary. Dad, eat more if you like it. It's rare for me to visit you. I have to feed you more, right? Dad, don't worry. Everything is fine in the company. Without you, Jin Taiha is still spinning, and even better than when you were there. She smiled lightly. Dad, are you especially gratified? Shin Zhongshan could no longer eat. The food was stuck in his throat, and his mouth was full. His face had turned purple, making people worry that he would die from suffocation in the next second. Shin Lian put down the things in her hands and smiled. Dad, why are you so careless? She picked up the water on the side and fed it to him. Dad, drink water. If you die, no matter how high my achievements are, who can appreciate it? Is that so? She poured the entire glass of water into his mouth, and Shen Zhongshan suddenly spat out the food and water. His face turned purple, and he couldn't stop panting. He pointed his finger at her, unable to utter a single word. Shenlian was sprayed all over her face. She frowned and reached out to wipe the stains off her face. She chuckled and said, "Dad, do you hate me, or do you want more?" She desperately poured the food in her hand into his mouth, regardless of whether Shen Zhongshan would die from gluttony. When his mouth was full of food, Shanlian kicked him with her crippled foot. Shen Zhongshan's slightly heavy body fell to the ground in a sorry state, and Shenlian's foot was also hurting. Chapter 857. Shanlian looked condescendingly at her father, who was lying on the ground, trying to live without purpose. She was still angry. "Shen Zhongshan, if it wasn't for you, there wouldn't be Pei Chi in this world. I wouldn't be in such a miserable state, and I wouldn't have lost this leg. So, no matter how bad I am to you, you have to bear it. Because this is your sin. Your sin." Shenlian pursed her lips, narrowed her eyes, and smiled lightly. Only in this kind of perverted torture of Shen Zhongshan could she feel a trace of pleasure. Only then could she feel that she was really alive and had obtained everything. Yes, what was she afraid of? She had most of Jean Tai's shares, and Shang Yuan's 20%, and Pei Chi, that poor little girl, had nothing. If she wanted to play her to death, it would be as easy as pinching an ant to death. Shenlian stood up, ignoring Shen Zhongshan's appearance, and walked out calmly. For more than a year, as long as she was unhappy, she would come over to torture Shen Zhongshan. In the past, she was still worried about Mrs. Shun, but Mrs. Shun did nothing other than scolding her as a beast. So, Shenlian could do whatever she wanted, as long as she didn't kill him. But she didn't know that after she left, two men in suits flashed into the ward and helped Shen Zhongshan up. They looked a little apologetic. "Mr. Shun, I'm sorry." Shen Zhongshan sat down again, and his expression was no longer stupid, but clear. His eyes were shining, and he looked at his former capable subordinates and waved his hand. "I don't blame you. I was the one who told you not to face her." He paused. "Did you get what I wanted?" One of them nodded. Shunlian has no heart for work now. Jean Tai's business has always been high, but she can't see it. She has been immersed in her relationship with Tang Yu, especially, the man said hesitantly, especially when Miss Pei returned to B City. It seems to have stimulated Shanlian, and she has no heart for work. Shen Zhongshan nodded. This was within his expectations. However, his heart still ached. Shenlian had been the apple of his eye since he was young. He had no feelings for Mrs. Shun, but because of Shenlian, he had never thought of divorce. Even when Zhaoku was pregnant, he didn't think twice about asking her to abort the child. He was sorry for his family, but he never thought that his daughter would become so crazy one day. When he slowly regained consciousness, his youngest daughter, Tang Xian, was gone. It was because Shenlian told her the truth that Tang Xian chose to leave on her own accord. Compared to Shenlian, he felt the most sorry for Tang Xian and Pei Chi. Now that Tang Xian was gone, he could only make it up to Chi. He was willing to give her everything he had. As for Shenlian, as a father, he didn't want to see her suffer any more misfortune. No matter how bad she was still his child. Shen Zhongshan took the thing from the man's hand and looked at it carefully. This was half of Shen Zhongshan's life. He didn't expect that it would be used to deal with his own daughter. The reason why he did this was to protect her. As for Shenlian, could she understand his painstaking efforts? After a while, Shen Zhongshan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his tone was indifferent. "Make an appointment with Tang Yu for me." His subordinate nodded. "Okay." Shen Zhongshan turned his face away from the window. It was late autumn again. The leaves had all fallen. Some old friends had also left for a long time. 3 days later, Shen Zhongshan and Tang Yu met secretly. This meeting would completely change the situation in B City. Chapter 858. In the CEO's office of King Entertainment, Qin Anlin put down the newspaper in his hand and took a long drag on his cigarette. He held back the curses that were about to come out of his mouth. What a fucking pervert. Did Tang Si not care about his reputation? Or was he anxious? He looked anxious. He heard that Lin Jinrong's proposal that night was disrupted by Tang Yu. It made sense. If his cousin married an ex-wife, how could Tang Yu stand it? However, Qin Anlin was not so naive to think that Tang Yu was only doing it for a confession. He was obviously supporting Marvel. Sometimes, rumors were the best publicity. He looked at Tang Yu's actions. He seemed to be leaning towards the Lin Group. Behind all this, it was not that simple. It was more or less related to Shen Lian. Perhaps, it was also the key reason why Tang Yu was controlled by Shen Lian. As he was thinking, there was a knock on the door. Qin Anlin looked up. "Come in." His assistant brought Pei Huan in. After they arrived, the assistant left first. Qin Anlin glanced at Pei Huan and said calmly, "Sit." Pei Huan looked down on Qin Anlin. She had done it with him once and was praised a little. Later, she did it herself. In the past 2 years, she had relied on her own resources to get back on her feet. It had nothing to do with Qin Anlin. Right now, Big Sis didn't lack money, so she didn't care much about Chairman Qin and was cold and indifferent to him. Pei Huan sat down and stretched her fingers. She admired her exquisite nails and blew at them. "Why is President Qin looking for me?" Qin Anlin frowned. He did not argue with her. "I heard that you have made up with Pei Chi-Chi." In the past, Pei Huan and Pei Chi-Chi did not interact with each other. Now, she did not know that they had made up. Pei Huan's eyes widened. After a while, he returned to his lazy look. Where did President Qin hear this from? Pei Chi-Chi and I, how is that possible? Qin Anlin looked at Pei Huan and smiled. So stubborn? Pei Huan still wanted to say something, but Qin Anlin unexpectedly said, "If there's nothing else, let's go out first." As he spoke, he lowered his head to look at the document. Pei Huan stared at him for a long time. Qin Anlin looked up. "Aren't you going out yet?" Pei Huan felt that Qin Anlin seemed to have changed. He seemed to have become more respectful towards women. In the past, in his company, women were equivalent to toys and merchandise. Was his change because of Pei Chi-Chi? And his courteous attitude towards her was also because of Pei Chi-Chi? Pei Huan hesitated for a moment before saying, "The day after tomorrow, I will be holding a religious ceremony at Qingshui Road. Pei Chi-Chi will be there too." Qin Anlin lit up a cigarette. "Why did you think of helping me? I thought you would hate me." After all, he had slept with Pei Huan in such a despicable way. However, Qin Anlin had long forgotten the process. But Pei Huan probably would not forget. Pei Huan snorted. "I'll just take it that I was bitten by a dog." She paused for a moment. Her eyes were a little misty. "Maybe I think it's better for you to be with Pei Chi-Chi." She flipped her hair. "Just take it that I don't want her to be with Lin Jinrong." With that, Pei Huan walked out, and Qin Anlin chuckled. Actually, Pei Huan cared about Pei Chi-Chi in her heart, but she pretended to be indifferent on the surface. Chapter 859. Xiaomei had been in charge of a few popular artists and was used to seeing big waves. She looked at Pei Huan's current state. It was not impossible for her to become more popular, but this girl had no ambition. She seemed to be playing around and did not care about being popular. That was good too. If you wanted to be popular in the entertainment industry, you had to pay the price. Actually, on the surface, many people were suffering from depression and were struggling to hold on. Pei Huan's current state was good too. Xiaomei had been with her for a long time and could guess her thoughts. She had also heard of President Qin's thoughts. President Qin liked Pei Chi-Chi. So be it. Xiaomei smiled. "As long as you're happy." Pei Huan stretched her arms. "Yes, as long as you're happy." She did not lack anything now, but she felt that Pei Chi-Chi was more miserable. She had once loved Jinrong deeply, and when Jinrong became a vegetable, she did not hesitate to abort the child. Pei Huan thought that the one she loved the most was herself. But Pei Chi-Chi was different. She had been loved by Tang Yu, but when she was about to die, Her child was gone, her husband became someone else's fiancé, and her company was gone too. Pei Huan felt that she was too kind to sympathize with Pei Chi-Chi. On Saturday, Pei Chi-Chi got up early to tidy up and called Old Can for breakfast. Old Can was not fully awake yet, but he could eat breakfast with his eyes closed. After eating, he touched his stomach in satisfaction. "Where are you going later? You're up so early." Seeing that he was not fully awake, Pei Chi-Chi wanted to tease him. She leaned over and said softly, "I'm going to meet Pei Huan later. Can you send me there?" Old Can woke up immediately and glared at her. Then, he threw his wallet to her from his pocket. "Take a taxi or buy a car." She did not have the intention at first, but after hearing what Old Can said, she felt that it was time to buy a car. "How about an Audi Q3? It's suitable for girls. White is fine." Old Can was a standard man of action. He simply called a familiar car dealer and ordered one. He transferred over 300,000 online without blinking. Pei Chi-Chi cupped her face and walked up to Lao Kansas. "Lao Can, what should I do? I feel like I'm being kept by someone, but this feeling is great." Lao Can pinched her face and continued, "That's good. We'll move to a new place to stay after we wash up tonight." Pei Chi-Chi screamed, and Old Can smiled contentedly. After waiting for about an hour, the car arrived. Miraculously, the license plates were all ready. Pei Chi-Chi felt that Lao Can couldn't be any better. Lao Can glanced at her and said, "I don't need to meet Pei Huan?" "Oh, not for now." She looked at his wallet like a puppy looking at a bone. Lao Can knocked her on the head with his wallet and scolded jokingly, "Pei Chi-Chi, can't you grow up a little? You've seen a lot of money, but now you're acting like a miser." Pei Chi-Chi laughed. "Aren't we in dire straits now?" Old Can felt that money was really a good thing. A car was enough to bribe Pei Chi-Chi. Otherwise, he would have to tell him about Pei Huan. Thinking of this, he looked at his little disciple suspiciously. "Pei Chi-Chi, you've been wanting a car for a long time, haven't you?" Pei Chi-Chi got into the car and tried it out. Then, she gestured for Lao Can to get in and fasten his seatbelt. She smiled and said, "How can I let Master spend so much money? I'll be more casual when Master is more casual." Chapter 860. After driving one round, Pei Chi-Chi left Old Can behind and drove back to Qingshui Road. She thought to herself that she wasn't too down and out. Now that she was driving an Audi, she could be considered to have returned home in glory. Pei Huan was already prepared. The chanting monk had arrived as well. Everyone was just waiting for Pei Chi-Chi. The ritual was naturally long, but Pei Chi-Chi didn't feel bored at all. She knelt and prayed for Pei Mingi. Pei Huan knelt beside her and said softly, "Pei Chi-Chi, I know that my mom and I didn't treat you well in the past. I snatched Jinrong away, and my mom even wanted to sell you to Mr. Zhong. Later on, Zhao Ku ordered her to do all those things." Pei Chi-Chi didn't say anything and listened quietly. She already knew what Pei Huan would say to her. The fact that she could walk back to the house in Qingshui Road meant that she was forgiven. The pain in the past haunted her like a demon. But after losing her child, the pain was too distant. Pei Huan's voice was still soft. "My mom was punished too. And I even seduced Tang Yu before, but I didn't succeed. Now, you can see it for yourself. It's just nice on the surface." Pei Huan stood up and so did Pei Chi-Chi. Looking around, this was the place where they grew up together. They didn't have any good memories together. All they had was Pei Huan's knees and Pei Chi-Chi being scolded by Zhou Meilin. They were never good sisters. Later on, they became sworn enemies and couldn't wait to kill each other until Tang Yu saved Pei Huan. At that time, Pei Huan felt that there was actually someone in this world who cared about her. And that person turned out to be the most unlikely person, Pei Chi-Chi. Pei Huan looked at Pei Chi-Chi with a fervent gaze. "Pei Chi-Chi, I'm tired. I don't want to fight anymore. I'm not as strong as you. You can digest everything and carry everything on your own. I can't." Her eyes were filled with desire. She yearned for Pei Chi-Chi to hug her. She was a good-for-nothing. She accepted it. She just shrugged her shoulders. She longed for love. but no man was willing to give it to her. Those who came and went were all men who coveted her body or her money. Pei Huan was young and beautiful. She would not be as foolish as Zhou Meilin, who would cheat her of everything just because of Rong Lei. She looked straight at Pei Chi and pursed her beautiful lips. Pei Chi didn't speak for a long time, so Pei Huan said, "It's fine if you don't want to. Pei Chi, I don't have to be your sister. I'm telling you, I won't beg you again." Pei Chi looked at her and said slowly, "Pei Huan, I remember that you are clearly a few days older than me." She was still shameless enough to want to be a younger sister. Pei Huan was stunned for a moment, then she became wild with joy. "It's not bad to be an elder sister, but Pei Chi, you have to give in to me, because my IQ is lower than yours." Pei Chi's face darkened. How did Zhou Meilin give birth to such a shameless girl? She snorted coldly. "Didn't you say that you wouldn't beg me just now? You told me not to do this?" Pei Huan wanted to put on airs, but she shrugged and said softly, "I'm not begging. I'm begging." There was a huge difference. Seeing that the ritual was over, Pei Chi picked up her car keys and was about to leave. Pei Huan stopped her and said weakly, "I'm the one begging. I'm the one begging." Pei Chi smiled. "You're quite obedient." Pei Huan followed behind her like a follower. This was a new understanding of Pei Chi. Chapter 861. Pei Huan saw that the car was not bad and insisted on driving it. Pei Chi sat by the side and made a phone call. It was Old Kansas. They were discussing the car's situation over the phone. After the call, Pei Chi put away her phone. Pei Huan looked at the road and asked casually, "Who's on the other end?" Pei Chi did not know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Pei Huan cared about Old Kan very much. She did not really care about age. Old Kan was a good person, but Suimo was in the middle. If Pei Huan insisted on being with Old Kan, would she repeat Xinlian's tragedy? She thought about it and smiled. It's Old Kan. The car is his. Right after she said that, there was a violent tremor in front of them. Pei Huan drove the car onto the green belt and white smoke rose from the front of the car. Pei Chi felt dizzy and immediately unbuckled her seatbelt and got out of the car. She opened the hood of the car and white smoke came out. She choked a few times and sighed. Then, she contacted the car company to pull the car. Pei Huan was like a child who had done something wrong. She held her bag and stood at the intersection. "Pei Chi, are you angry?" "No." Pei Chi stood up straight without much expression on her face. "I'm just surprised that there's such a stupid person in this world." Pei Huan was more like a little wife, standing there without making a sound. Pei Chi was a little confused. Pei Huan seemed to care about her a lot, but she never intended to give her heart. Never. She felt that she was a little despicable. Maybe it was because Pei Huan looked like Tang Xian. Tang Xian would always call Chi in that soft voice, Tang Xian, but Tang Xian would never come back. No matter how soft Pei Huan was, she was not Tang Xian. Pei Chi looked up with tears in her eyes. She did not dare to look at Tang Xian. Perhaps she did not want to believe that Tang Xian was no longer around. If she didn't look, she would imagine that one day, Tang Xian would suddenly appear in front of her apartment door with a little bag on her back. She would look at her eagerly and say, "Chi, Dad and Mom are quarreling again. Can I stay with you for a few days?" Tang Xian, if I could turn back time, I would choose to return all the good things to you, even if I had to lose everything. Pei Huan looked at Pei Chi carefully. She saw a glint of tears in her eyes. Was she going to cry? Pei Huan comforted her clumsily. "Pei Chi, you still have me in the future." Pei Chi turned her head, and the look in her eyes made Pei Huan a little afraid. Ever since she was young, she had been afraid and hated Pei Chi's eyes. Now, she didn't hate it, but she was still afraid. She made no sound. "All right, then you wait here for the car. I have something to do, so I'll leave first." Pei Chi wanted to be quiet, but with Pei Huan around, she couldn't be quiet. She wanted to see Tang Xian. Let's see if she's all right. Pei Huan nodded and agreed. Pei Chi left. After a few steps, she turned back and saw that Pei Huan was still standing there. She looked like she was about to cry, like an abandoned child. Pei Chi stood still and said quietly, "Pei Huan, you're 22 years old now. You have to walk the road alone from now on. As for me, I can't always be by your side. If my heart is empty, how can I always be by your side?" Pei Huan took a deep breath and resisted the urge to cry. Actually, she knew that Chi had not forgiven her, but she was willing to wait. Pei Chi bought a bouquet of daisies and went to visit Tang Xian. She stayed in the cemetery for a long time. Chapter 862. Tang Xian's smile was also very bright. The scorching sun was like a blazing fire, illuminating everything in front of her. As time went by, the sun dimmed and the sky turned gray, just like her mood. Pei Chi stood there, the wind blowing on her face. She said in a low voice, "Tang Xian, every time I go home and walk down the stairs, I feel very excited. I always feel that you might be waiting for me at the door." That was why she didn't want to come over and face the reality. But no matter how unwilling she was, Tang Xian was no longer there. She closed her eyes, not daring to imagine what Tang Xian was like before she left. It was just like how she didn't dare to imagine when she lost her child. Did her child feel pain? Did he miss this world? Did he feel indignant? She stood there blankly, looking at Tang Xian's photo. The bright color was turning gray bit by bit. She stood there until 2 in the afternoon. After a few steps, she saw a black limousine parked at the entrance of the cemetery. A slender figure was leaning against the car door, holding a cigarette in his hand. He was patiently waiting for her and accompanying her. When Pei Chi turned around, she saw Qin Anlin. She paused for a moment, but still walked towards him. There was no way to hide. This was the only way. There was a bus 20 minutes walk from here. Pei Chi thought of the new car. She wondered if Laucan would kill her when she got back. She walked to Qin Anlin's side, but she didn't say anything and just walked forward. "It's going to rain soon. Are you going to go back in the rain?" A man's voice came from behind. Pei Chi ignored him and walked forward. Qin Anlin finished his cigarette, got into the car, and drove beside her. The car window was open, and he smiled at her. "Pei Chi, you really don't want to get in the car? I won't like you." She didn't look at him and walked straight ahead. Qin Anlin laughed and continued to drive behind her. With one hand on the steering wheel and the other on the window, he looked at her with an amused smile. Pei Chi was dressed in black today and had her hair tied into a simple ponytail. She looked extremely elegant. He just looked at her like this and felt that he was not tired of looking at her. This was very rare. No matter how beautiful a woman was, Qin Anlin would lose interest after looking at her twice. However, he had a different feeling for Pei Chi. Looking at her profile, his gaze slowly softened. "Pei Chi, it's enough that I like you. You pervert." Pei Chi stopped, and his car stopped as well. One was in the car, and the other was out of the car, staring straight at each other. Qin Anlin's voice was calm. "Pei Chi, I know it's stupid to confess my love in this situation, and I'll be suspected of taking advantage of the situation. But if I don't confess now, I'll be even more stupid. You will regret it later." She did not want to hear it. He covered his ears and continued walking. Qin Anlin's car continued to follow, driving slowly. His voice also drilled into her ears in a low and heavy voice. "Pei Chi, I like you. It's not the kind of like that I like women, but the kind of feelings I have for women. I can guarantee that I won't look for another woman in the future. In fact, I haven't looked for another woman since you returned to B City." Pei Chi paused again and glared at him. "Qin Anlin, no one asked you to keep your chastity." Qin Anlin's expression was a little innocent. He smiled slightly. "Pei Chi, but I want to do it. Not for you, but for myself. Because the girl I like will mind." Chapter 863. Let's try. His eyes were familiar to her. Pei-Chi-Chi, I'll kiss you for a minute. If you're not moved, I'll give up. Pei-Chi-Chi looked at him for 10 seconds and said, You're crazy. He didn't get angry. He chuckled and said, Chi-Chi, you're lovesick. He drove with one hand and touched his face. Look, I've lost weight. Pei-Chi-Chi didn't look at him. She decided to ignore him. After a long time, he would feel bored. She felt that it would be more fun for him to go back to a group of women. Qin Anlin kept driving behind her. Pei-Chi-Chi walked faster and faster, and he couldn't help laughing. She was so cute even when she ignored him. It was raining. Qin Anlin coughed. It's raining. Are you sure you don't want to get in the car? I'm not going. Pei-Chi-Chi didn't even look back as he walked even faster. But she was walking too fast, and there was a small stone in front of her. She accidentally twisted her foot. Pei-Chi-Chi let out a soft cry. She frowned and looked in pain. Qin Anlin immediately turned off the engine and got out of the car to help her. What's wrong? Her foot hurt so much that she couldn't stand. She could only stand on one foot, but that was it. She stubbornly waved his hand away. It's none of your business. Qin Anlin looked at her beautiful face, which was wrinkled like a small bun. It was strangely cute. He thought about it. She didn't look so serious. I'll carry you. He gestured for her to lie on his back. Pei-Chi-Chi looked around. It was deserted. She didn't want to be drenched to death here, so she finally chose to lie on his back. When her body touched his back, he only felt that it was extremely soft. It was like a newborn bird, like a warm cloud brushing his heart. Her face was not too close to his neck, and her breath was faintly discernible. But this magnified his perception even more. He put his hand on her calf, which was quite gentlemanly. Qin Anlin walked to the car, held her with one hand, took out the car key with the other, put his wallet in his pocket, and then locked the door. Qin Anlin, what are you doing? Pei-Chi-Chi was stunned by his series of actions. She kicked her legs around and accidentally kicked the injured leg, causing her to cry out in pain. Qin Anlin carried her and patted her leg. I'll carry you to the hospital. She was anxious. Don't you have a car? Didn't you say you didn't want to get on the carriage? Qin Anlin chuckled. He had never felt so gentle in his heart before. All for Pei-Chi-Chi. Pei-Chi-Chi was so anxious that she used her uninjured leg to kick him, but to Qin Anlin, it didn't hurt at all. Pei-Chi-Chi bit her lip and gave in. Qin Anlin, it's raining now. He patted her again. Don't move, or I'll probably have to hold your butt. He thought for a moment and opened the trunk. He took out an umbrella and stuffed it in her hand. Hold it. Pei-Chi-Chi almost exploded. It was a half-hour drive from here to the city. How long would it take for him to carry her like this? Qin Anlin, put me down. She kicked and hit him. You pervert. His breathing stopped for a moment and his body froze. Pei-Chi-Chi didn't know what would happen to him. She held her breath. Chapter 864. He reminded her kindly also, no one will come to help you even if you scream yourself hoarse. Pei-Chi-Chi stood on one foot and suddenly took out her phone from her pocket. I have this. She was about to call Lao Can's phone when Qin Anlin snatched the phone from her hand. I don't have it anymore, he said abominably. Now you can try your vocal cords and practice your voice. She glared at him. An evil smile appeared on his lips. Pei-Chi-Chi, all the best. After that, he really walked towards his car. Pei-Chi-Chi was furious. Was he really going to leave? Was he going to leave her alone? Qin Anlin. She called his name, extremely exasperated. He opened the car door and looked back at her. Pei-Chi-Chi pursed her lips and said in a softer voice, Give me back my phone. She stood on one foot with the umbrella in one hand and looked like she was about to fall. Qin Anlin thought for a moment, turned off the phone, took out the card, and walked over to return the phone to her kindly. Here you go. As for the card, he had thrown it away. If she could move her mouth now, she would have bitten him to death first. Qin Anlin looked at her fierce eyes. smiled, and waved his hand. Goodbye, Pei Chi. He walked back to the car, opened the door, got in, and started the car smoothly. She watched helplessly as he drove the car away. She stared blankly. Qin Anlin, you bastard. Finally, Pei Chi lost her temper. She kicked her injured foot and fell again. This time, she was covered in mud and the umbrella fell to the side. She looked very embarrassed. She sat there angrily, hugging her knees and pursing her lips tightly. The rain fell on her face. It was cold, but not cold. Instead, it was a little cool, which was just right to put out the fire. The car stopped in front of her, and Qin Anlin put his elbow on the window. Pei Chi, do you want to sit in the mud, or do you want me to carry you to the hospital? One couldn't eat one's pride. Pei Chi only hesitated for 2 seconds before she pursed her lips. Let's go to the hospital. Qin Anlin's heart was softened like never before. The door opened, he got out of the car and closed the door. Step by step, he walked towards her. With every step he took, he felt as if he was doomed eternally. It wasn't that he didn't have a chance to escape, but he didn't want to. He was almost 30 years old, and this was the first time he liked a girl so much. For the first time, he didn't want to give up. He squatted down and helped her up, letting her lie on his back again. He picked up the umbrella and placed it in her hands. His shoulders were very broad, and the muscles on his back were very strong. It was probably because he had been training for a long time. Pei Chi put one hand on his shoulder and held the umbrella with the other. His feet weren't very painful, but he couldn't walk. Just like that, he carried her on his back and continued walking. Even when cars passed by them, he had no intention of stopping them. Qin Anlin, are you crazy? It's going to be dark by the time we reach the hospital. Pei Chi was tired and hungry. She wanted to bite him. Qin Anlin chuckled. Pei Chi, if it's possible, I want to walk until there's no more Tangyu in your heart, and I'm the only one left. You're crazy. Pei Chi was so angry that she really bit him on his shoulder. She bit him like a little puppy, lying on his back for a long time without moving. She bit him so hard that the muscles on Qin Anlin's back tightened. Chapter 865. She relaxed and pursed her lips without saying a word. Later, she simply ignored him. If he wanted to carry her, let him. Anyway, she couldn't live without a piece of flesh. However, Tangyu would have one less piece of flesh to worry about. Qin Anlin carried Pei Chi on his back for the whole afternoon. The paparazzi in City B were not to be trifled with. They took photos early and prepared to see him on Monday. Moreover, Qin Anlin went to Shengyuan Hospital out of all the hospitals. Pei Chi knew his intention, but she remained silent. He always carried her behind his back when he went for the registration, payment, diagnosis, and X-ray. The doctors and nurses who didn't know him would think that they were a couple. Those who knew him would look at him meaningfully. If Mr. Tang saw it, how painful it would be. After the examination, Pei Chi only had a sprain. Although it was not a serious problem, she was still prescribed a lot of medicine. Pei Chi looked bitter. It's better to stay in the hospital for a few days, the attending doctor suggested. He knew Pei Chi, Mr. Tang's ex-wife. He was very smart. If she didn't stay in the hospital, she would have to go back. And she would be taken away by President Qin? Pei Chi looked at the hospitalization form written by the doctor. Her eyes were a little dazed. I don't need to stay in the hospital, right? The doctor didn't look up. You will have difficulty moving for a week. It's better not to walk. If there is someone at home to take care of you, then you don't need to. If not, it's better to stay in the hospital. There won't be any accidents. Pei Chi thought of Lao Kansas. Lao Kan was outside all day and might not have time to take care of her. She thought about it and gave up. Stay in the hospital. Pei Chi glanced at it and then coughed. I want to stay in the VIP ward, the best one. The doctor looked up and Qin Anlin smiled. Pei Chi, do you have money with you? Of course you do. You made me fall. Shouldn't you be responsible? Pei Chi said matter-of-factly. The smile on Qin Anlin's face deepened. Yes, I should indeed take responsibility. He paused. Don't worry, Pei Chi. I'll take care of it. She looked up at him, feeling that his words were a little strange. Pei Chi couldn't walk on her feet. In the end, Qin Anlin found a wheelchair and pushed her to the VIP ward on the top floor. Each ward here was a zone. Of course, the price was not cheap. It was about 100,000 yuan a week. Pei Chi did not care about money. Anyway, Qin Anlin was rich. Qin Anlin settled her down, and the two nurses took good care of her. It seemed like there was no need for him to stay. Just then, Pei Chi's stomach growled a few times. Qin Anlin's eyes became a little deep. I'll have someone send food over. She had just said no, but he had already called the servants at home to send the dishes over. Moreover, they were all dishes that were high in calcium and nourishing. Looking at her expression, Qin Anlin put away his phone and said gently, Pei Chi, don't feel burdened. Didn't you say that you fell because of me? I should be responsible, right? He paused. Rest well. I'll have someone send 3 meals a day. If you need to go to the bathroom, ask the nurses to help you. Pei Chi did not say anything. Suddenly, there was something in his hand. She looked at it and saw that it was her SIM card. She was a little surprised. Didn't he throw it away? I lied to you. Qin Anlin's eyes fell on her little face. After a long time, he smiled gently and did not say anything. He helped her put the card directly. Call me if you need anything. Chapter 866. Qin Anlin gestured with his hand. Before he left, he gave the nurse another order before leaving. Pei Chi was a little surprised that he left so quickly. She had been forced to carry him to the hospital for 3 or 4 hours, but he didn't shamelessly stay. Qin Anlin looked at her blank expression and felt warmth in his heart. Pei Chi, did you know that no matter how cold you look, you are actually a very soft and contradictory little thing? He didn't quite understand what attracted him to her before, but at this moment, he knew. It was this kind of awkward little temper that was very cute. He walked over and reached out to rub her hair, but for some reason, he gave up and said, I'll come to see you in a few days. Pei Chi wanted to say no, but Qin Anlin had already left. She stared blankly for a long time before she picked up her phone and dialed Old Can's number. The sounds coming from the other side of the phone were a little chaotic, mixed with a man's panting and a woman's impatient voice. Pei Chi rolled her eyes. Oldkin was doing private work again. Oldkin always said that she was looking for inspiration for art. Pei Chi directly said that he was a carnivore. Moreover, Oldkin had a bad habit of looking for brainless women, saying that they were less troublesome. She waited for a long time before Oldkin got rid of the woman on him and sat up. Pei Chi, Oldkin, let me tell you a piece of bad news and a piece of good news. Her voice was nasal. Oldkin leaned against the headboard and watched the little vixen crawl over again. Her little hand reached over again. He didn't care about her and snorted. Tell me the bad news first. Pei Chi snorted. The bad news is that Pei Huan damaged your car. She skillfully lifted Pei Huan out. Sure enough, Oldkin's breathing was messed up, and then he said in a rough voice, It's fine if it's damaged. I'll buy you another one tomorrow. Pei Chi covered her face. Oldkin was quite rich. When Oldkin heard Pei Huan's name, he felt a little uncomfortable. He asked again, What's the good news? The good news is, I'm in the hospital. Pei Chi's voice was nasal again, like a little lamb. Now, only in front of Lao Can would she reveal such a vulnerable side. Oldkin cursed in a low voice, and then his voice sounded a little exasperated. Bullshit good news. Pei Chi, where are you? I'll come over immediately. Therefore, Pei Chi told him in a soft voice that it was just a minor injury. She only needed him to go back and bring her some clean clothes. Oldkin hung up the phone and shook off the little fairy on his body. That little vixen had been pestering Lao Can for a long time. Seeing that Lao Can was willing to eat meat with her, she made a phone call and wanted to leave. The little demoness was naturally unwilling. She pestered Old Can and refused to let him go. Her voice was also extremely charming. I don't care. Today, you're mine. Her little hand drew circles on his Xiong's fur. You want to leave after just one time? Old Can, tell me, are you satisfied? As she said that, the little vixen sat in Old Can's arms. Her voluptuous body made people want to vomit blood just by looking at it. She even kept swaying in front of Old Kansas. Old Can's eyes were bloodshot. However, he had seen this kind of scene many times, so he didn't have much interest in it. Chapter 867. Oldkin jumped out of bed, pulled up his pants, zipped up his pants, and left. That little vixen was cursing behind him, but Oldkin had already closed the door. Oldkin rode his heavy motorcycle back to the apartment first and swiped his card to open Pei Chi-Chi's. She had his apartment card, and he had hers. They were master and disciple, but they lived like brother and sister. They had never said it out loud, but they had such feelings for each other. Old Can's big hand was holding Pei Chi-Chi's underwear, and it didn't look out of place at all. He stuffed it into a paper bag and rode his bike to the hospital. When he reached the top floor and saw the ward, Old Can coughed softly. This ward is more luxurious than my apartment. Pei Chi-Chi was sitting with one leg hanging over the wall, and there was a bowl of tonic soup on the small table in front of her. She drank it contentedly and said in a muffled voice, I faked an accident today. Oldkin put the paper bag on the head of the bed and sat down. He wanted to smoke, but put it down again. It must be a rich man. Pei Chi-Chi didn't hide it from him. She said, it's Qin Anlin. Old Can was a photographer and could be considered a member of the entertainment industry. Towards Qin Anlin, the deepest impression he had was, Suemo was also one of Qin Anlin's women. Of course, Suemo was 10 years older than Qin Anlin, but Suemo had still been cheated on by him. Qin Anlin naturally wouldn't trust an old woman like Suemo. He slept with her a few times and gave her some resources. But in Old Can's heart, this was a hurdle that he couldn't get over. His gaze was a little complicated. That guy is pestering you? Pei Chi-Chi put down the soup spoon in her hand. It'll be fine after this period of time. Old Can, I won't be with him. In the future, she wouldn't be with anyone for any reason. In the future, Pei Chi-Chi wouldn't live for others, but for herself. If one day she wanted to fall in love and get married, it would definitely be for love. Oldkin let out a long breath and didn't say anything. Pei Chi-Chi looked at his expression and guessed what was going on. She had heard about Suemo and Qin Anlin from Amy. Of course, it wasn't directed at Lao Kansas. Not many people knew about Lao Can and Suemo. She didn't know how to comfort Lao Kansas. She only told him because she didn't want to hide it from him. She cared about Lao Can and his feelings. She didn't want to hurt Lao Can's heart because of her. Old Can was a smart man. Pei Chi-Chi's reaction clearly showed that she knew something. However, they didn't point it out. Some things were better left unsaid. Lao Can stayed with her until 10 o'clock in the evening. He only left when Pei Chi-Chi was about to sleep. Fortunately, there were 2 nurses on duty, so he was not worried. He had work to do the next day, so he could only come in the afternoon. As soon as she arrived, she heard Pei Huan's soft voice, like a little lamb, persuading Pei Chi-Chi to drink more. She said that the soup was made with love, which she had brewed for 3 hours. Old Can's fan-sized palm was pressed against the door, and he had an indescribable expression on his face. Pei Huan was unhappy and snorted. Why do you look like you've seen a ghost when you see me? Am I that scary? Old Can looked like he had eaten shit. He walked in slowly and placed a bag of fruits on the table. He looked at the soup in Pei Chi-Chi's hand and took the spoon from Pei Chi-Chi's hand. He took a sip and frowned. Chapter 868. Pei Huan's face changed. She took a sip of the soup in disbelief and immediately took the soup away from Pei Chi-Chi's hand. It tastes so bad. Why do you still want to drink it? Pei Chi-Chi laughed and looked at Pei Huan's clumsy appearance. I just don't want your 3 hours of love to be wasted. Pei Huan bit her lip and didn't say anything. She quietly poured the soup away. After a while, she asked in a low voice, Pei Chi-Chi, do you think I'm useless and useless? Not really. Pei Chi-Chi leaned against the headboard. In fact, you're quite capable. For example, before she finished, Pei Huan hurriedly interrupted her. Say no more. She didn't want Lao Can to know that she had stolen Lin Jinrong. Although she didn't appreciate this savage, she didn't want Lao Can to know her past and know that she was such a bad woman. Pei Chi-Chi looked at Pei Huan and said slowly, I just said that you're good at acting. Pei Huan's heart was lifted up high, but now it fell down again. She looked at Pei Chi-Chi and found a trace of mischief in her eyes. Pei Chi-Chi looked at Lao Can and Pei Huan, and then she laughed. It turned out that it was so fun to play tricks on others. Moreover, this person was Pei Huan, whom she used to hate the most. She hadn't laughed like this for a long time. Her whole face was glowing with a different expression. When Qin Anlin walked in, he saw such a scene. He stood at the door, leaning against the door, and looked at her deeply. Pei Chi-Chi looked up and saw him standing at the door, and the smile on her face disappeared. Qin Anlin walked in and said indifferently, What are you talking about? The atmosphere changed as soon as he came. Pei Huan naturally didn't dare to act rashly in front of him, or rather, she didn't want to see this person, because she had slept with Qin Anlin in Lao, Kansas. Although it was all once, she still had some integrity. She felt a little awkward, so she found an excuse and left. Pei Chi-Chi looked at Lao, Kansas. He didn't look too good. He must have taken it to heart. She sighed. Just like how she disapproved of Pei Huan and Old Can from the bottom of her heart, she did not want Old Can to be with Suimo either. People like Suimo were too involved in worldly affairs and were obsessed with fame and fortune, but Old Can was different. Old Can was loyal to his friends. He was not restricted by the secular world, and his love was too deep. Come to think of it, he and Suimo weren't young anymore. If Suimo had the slightest intention of getting married, she wouldn't have delayed it until now. She said in a low voice, Old Can, I have something to discuss with President Qin about compensation. You can go back first. Lao Can clenched his fists and looked at Qin Anlin indifferently. The muscles on his face twitched a few times. Fortunately, it was hidden by his beard. Pei Chi-Chi sighed inwardly as she watched Lao Can leave. After Lao Can left, Qin Anlin rubbed his nose. He seems to be prejudiced against me. Since he said that, he must have known something. Pei Chi-Chi did not play dumb. Instead, she sneered. Then you have to ask yourself if you've done anything. Qin Anlin would never tell Pei Chi-Chi about his relationship with Suimo. He smiled. I've never done anything with Old Can. Pei Chi-Chi knew what was going on when he avoided the main point. Qin Anlin put down the lunchbox in his hand and sat down. Are you angry? His tone was actually a little intimate. Pei Chi-Chi frowned. Qin Anlin, why should I be angry? He quickly changed the topic. Didn't you say you wanted to talk about compensation? Chapter 869. Pei Chi-Chi opened the food box in his hand, and the soup inside was delicious. It was surprisingly to her liking. As she drank the soup, she said vaguely, Give me your family's cook. Qin Anlin's eyes lit up. If you marry me, my chef can make soup for you every day. Pei Chi-Chi put down the spoon in her hand and said, It sounds like a big price. Qin Anlin pursed his lips and chuckled. Pei Chi-Chi, you can. Try it now. She continued to sip the soup. When she was done, her eyes were still lowered, but her voice couldn't be more serious. Don't trouble Old Kansas. Qin Anlin's gaze deepened. She had finally mentioned this. He had a lot of pasts, but he had never been stained by a single leaf. However, among the people he had slept with, one was Pei Huan, and the other was Suimo, who had a little relationship with Pei Chi-Chi. Pei Huan didn't have anything to do with it. As for Suimo, Pei Chi seemed to care about it, but she cared about it for Old Kansas. Qin Anlin said in a deep voice, I don't have anything to do with Suimo, and I won't do anything to Old Kan because of it. His voice deepened. Pei Chi, maybe my past is more exciting than Tang Yu's, but I promise it won't happen again. Qin Anlin, I really don't need your guarantee. Pei Chi smiled. But I'm very happy that you promised not to do anything to Old Kansas. Qin Anlin couldn't help but smile when he saw her smile. Then, he cleaned up the dishes for her. It was time for him to leave. However, he didn't leave. Instead, he sat on the sofa and dealt with some matters on his phone. After a while, his assistant also came over, bent over, and whispered something. Qin Anlin was rarely serious. His side profile was handsome and compelling. If one looked closely, he would feel that he was more handsome than usual. He was also so dazzling that people would take a few more glances at him. Pei Chi was no longer interested in listening to some of the things that happened in the entertainment industry. Among them, there was no lack of international movie queens. It seemed that Qin Anlin was not very satisfied with that one. That was true. Sometimes, when the A-listers became arrogant, they would not be very obedient. After his assistant finished speaking, Qin Anlin first glanced at Pei Chi and then said calmly, give her the cold shoulder for a while. Tell the public that she's going to the United States to study. The assistant nodded and left. Later, a few higher-ups came and sat on the sofa with Qin Anlin to discuss some matters, such as investing in new movies. After they left, Pei Chi looked at him. Is Empress Yi really going to be frozen by you? Only the Chinese Empress, who was like the sun in the sky, could shine in Canada. The foreign media called her the Chinese star. But when it came to Qin Anlin, she was frozen just like that. Qin Anlin's voice was a little lazy. She's too capricious. King Entertainment doesn't need a capricious artist. Aren't you afraid that she'll leave? Pei Chi quite liked Empress Yi. She sat up straight. You have to know that with her current net worth, she can easily set up her own studio and receive a blockbuster. Chapter 870. Pei Chi stared at him for a long time before spitting out two words. Unscrupulous businessman. She then asked, then will Yi Tianho be kept in cold storage? I'll release her when she's obedient. Qin Anlin's voice was indifferent, cold, and emotionless. Pei Chi didn't say anything. She wasn't in a position to plead for others. Besides, Yi Tianho's status was in the billions. She wouldn't have to worry about making ends meet even when she was old. After a while, she suddenly looked up at him. Qin Anlin, did you sleep with her before? President Qin almost choked. He hadn't expected Pei Chi to ask such a question. He felt a little uncomfortable. He grunted in agreement. He coughed lightly and added, actually, that was a few years ago, and it was the only time. He had slept with Yi Liangqiu before. That was her first time. He had only slept with her once. At that time, when he looked at the cold and charming girl below him, he felt that she was a gem and that she would shine brightly in the future. He found her a top manager to guide her and helped her to the throne of the best actress. Of course, there was a period of time in between when Yi Liangqiu was in a rebellious phase. She disappeared for half a year, and when she returned to King Entertainment, she was as thin as a ghost. Qin Anlin lost his temper for a while and put her in cold storage. Actually, she wouldn't be able to make a comeback if he didn't put her in cold storage. Because she was so thin, she didn't look good on camera at all. A year later, Yi Liangqiu returned to the public's attention. She amazed the public with a single feat and became an A-list artist of King Entertainment. Later on, she shone on the international stage. Qin Anlin rarely saw her. They would only see each other occasionally at award ceremonies. Yi Liangqiu cherished her reputation. After all these years, there wasn't even a single scandal. This made him very satisfied. But this time, it seemed to have touched a nerve. The company had arranged for her to study in the United States for 2 years. In the future, they would arrange for her to star in top Hollywood blockbusters. But Yi Liangqiu was unwilling. This was an opportunity that many people dreamed of, but she rejected it without even thinking about it. This made Qin Anlin quite angry. At this time, when Pei Chichi asked if he slept, Qin Anlin remembered that he had slept with Yi Liangqiu once. To put it more crudely, he slept with an artist. When he said that, Pei Chichi replied, "That's quite a pity. I've always liked watching her movies." Qin Anlin's eyes were clear. "Pei Chichi, if you marry me, I'll let her shoot one movie a year." "Forget it." She ignored his crazy words. For a moment, the scene quieted down again. Qin Anlin smiled. "Why did you bring this up?" Pei Chichi looked at him. "Let's not talk about this. I don't think we have anything in common to talk about." He smiled bitterly and didn't say anything else. He also felt that it was about time to leave. Otherwise, Pei Chichi's eyes were as fierce as a little wolf dog's. It was quite scary. Qin Anlin went out and saw Old Can at the elevator door. He was surprised but not surprised. He walked over slowly. "Waiting for me?" Old Can didn't say anything. In his opinion, if he could solve it with his fists, he was definitely not blind. With a single punch, Qin Anlin received a panda eye, and his body crashed into the elevator wall with a bang. It was quite a frightening sight. Qin Anlin groaned in pain. His body leaned against the wall of the elevator for a long time before he calmed down. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.